Well, hi everybody, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to the Joe Chaffee Weather Show on this Tuesday, the 24th of September, 2019. And it's just a little bit past 7:02 Eastern Time. Nice day here, really a big change from yesterday where we had highs up around 90 in some places in my area from eastern PA to southern New England. Today we were a solid 15 degrees cooler in some areas and topped out in the middle 70s, some upper 70s here and there. The humidity was low. Just was an all-around nice day. And our nice weather streak, I think, is going to continue into next week with some minor interruptions and some ups and downs as far as the temperatures are concerned. But on the whole, we're just kind of still in this very dry September pattern that has we've been kind of stuck with for a while. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing unless you are watching your lawn just basically disintegrate from being burned by all the lack of rainfall. Nonetheless, that will eventually change down the road, I think, at least to a certain extent. We have three tropical storms going on of various strength, of various strengths, and they all have kind of different looks to them, and they all really tell a tale of what's happening in the tropics. The two that I think I'm particularly interested in are obviously Karen, because Karen is now a little better organized than it was at this time yesterday. A few things have happened in the atmosphere that have created conditions to be, at the very least, being less unfavorable than they were. Lorenzo has me intrigued, if only because of the fact of its sheer size. The thing is enormous. So when we look at the satellite loop of it in just a little bit, and what's interesting about all three, they form a triangle, and they're all kind of interacting with each other in one form or another. And ultimately, I think Lorenzo may actually play a role in where Karen winds up going, because it is the position that Lorenzo's going to be in is effectively going to create a bit of a brick wall, preventing Karen from moving out to the east. But let's get to some of the local weather conditions that are going on right now, and then we're going to jump over and take care of the storms. So tonight, front and center, and of course, those of you watching in areas when it comes to severe weather, remember that you want to check your local National Weather Service office, particularly if you're watching this on a replay, and you can do that by going to weather.gov to get the latest on any watches, warnings, and the latest radars. As of 7:05, you can see there's a working tornado watch up for a good chunk of the state of Iowa, eastern Nebraska, southeastern Minnesota, and into a portion of northwestern Wisconsin, where we have SPC, the Storm Prediction Center, showing an enhanced risk of severe weather and a larger area of slight risk. There's hardly anything going on either side of that, out in the west or in the east, even down to Florida. No thunderstorms at all being forecast up and down the east coast, with the exception being the small area in Maine down into Vermont, because we do have an upper trough that is swinging through the eastern part of the United States, which is great news for the areas just south of here, because from central New England, because all the dry air is up and down the east coast, but you're getting some of that energy swinging around with the upper trough and shortwave that's moving out, and that's created some showers in there, and maybe even a couple of rumbles of thunder. You can see that those radar echoes behind it. Otherwise, the activity around much of the rest of the U.S. is pretty scattered, and we always like to look at WPC's rainfall forecast map for 7 days, because it gives us a pretty good idea of what they're thinking and with regards to the overall pattern. And you can see the east everywhere from Massachusetts on southward into northern New Jersey. You're talking about a whopping 1/100th of an inch to maybe 1/10 of an inch of precip over the next 7 days. And if that happens, it would probably be on Saturday, with the second of two cold fronts coming through. And so therefore, if we're talking about less than 1/10 of an inch, we're talking about a pretty good possibility that you might not see anything at all. And in the meantime, it's bone dry from there, clear down to Florida, pretty much westward into Texas, with the exception of the immediate Gulf Coast, showing a little bit of precip there. Still pretty active and busy, though, in the northern plains, with a couple of systems rolling through in the long range. So we're seeing rainfall amounts there of up to several inches in some places, and some of that is coming tonight, of course, with the severe weather risk. Some action in the southwest with some tropical moisture there, on up into the northern Rockies, with the trough coming into the west, getting a bit busy there down the road. But California's dry, Nevada's mostly dry, and Oregon is mostly on the dry side. So still kind of getting this idea when you look at this ridge in the east, folks, and I think that's what is going to be the primary driver going forward in the next 7 days. I also think we're going to see some changes that are going to be underway as we get into the month of October. Right now, in terms of how I'm seeing things, as far as the longer term is concerned, I think we're pretty much where we should be at this point. Nothing I'm seeing here is really out of the ordinary with regards to the weather in September. Yeah, we get some warm days, but we're not seeing stretches lasting 6, 7, 8 days worth. These weather fronts are coming through on a regular basis, and that's good. We may see one of those longer weather stretches set up for the first part of next week, but that will be broken, I think, by a cold front later next week. Now, on the U.S. satellite tonight, we've got a few systems visible. Of course, you can see Tropical Storm Jerry, which has been kind of inching its way up northward off the east coast and southwest of Bermuda. But it looks less and less like a tropical storm and more like an upper low when you really look at it. I mean, there is a low-level circulation, but the amount of convection around it is really minimal, especially when you go to sunset, you switch to the infrared. You hardly see any of those bright white cloud tops around the circulation there. Also, notice the clouds, and we'll see it better when we get on a close-up view, but where you are seeing some southern thunderstorm development in the southern semicircle, those thunderstorms are being blown south. Those clouds are being blown south-southwestward down toward Cuba, and you see how they kind of make a bottom there and then start shooting to the northeast. There's an upper trough that extends south from Jerry down toward Cuba. So you got Jerry, you got this upper trough. In the lower right corner, you begin to see you see Tropical Storm Karen, and the center of that tropical storm is on the northern edge, although there is convection now on the north side, and the center is on the northern edge of that expanding area of convection. That was one of the things that happened during the day today. The presentation of the storm on the satellite has definitely improved, but it's very busy here in the western Atlantic with two tropical storms and an upper trough in between, and with all of this working, there's a lot of complications that could happen going forward with regards to these storms and how they interact with each other. Meanwhile, you see moisture streaming out of the central plains and heading for the Great Lakes, and and going back up into the northern plains, coming into the western lakes. So there's your severe weather mechanism setting up for tonight. Some thunderstorms down in southwest Texas and into New Mexico. You're seeing some tropical moisture coming out of Baja California and streaming northward. Otherwise, much of the rest of the Rockies certainly looks to be on the dry side. So I'm not not really seeing, again, too much out of the ordinary. If you're looking for rain here in the eastern part of the United States, you better be patient because it ain't happening. And one more check of the, let's just check the radar tonight, if I can find what I did with the radar. There we go. We'll check the U.S. radar. There we go. Come on. Up to the top of the screen, please. There. All right. And you'll notice all of the stuff that you see in the Gulf states to the southeast, that's all ground clutter that's showing up. There's no precip at all on those radars. You see that patch of rain and some heavier downpours in parts of Maine, and some scattered showers sweeping through Massachusetts over around the Boston area, that little upper trough coming around. You've got some thunderstorms there up north of Dallas and into southeastern Oklahoma. You've got some patchy showers down in New Mexico and southeastern Arizona. And then, of course, you've got the short wave that's moving across the northern plains with those showers and storms in that area of severe weather and the tornado watch threat. So busy on the radar for sure. So let's start off with we'll go to the Hurricane Center. The center's satellite pictures and their forecasts and everything else, and let's take a look, starting with the wide view. You look at this view here of the Atlantic, pretty much everywhere south of 35 degrees north, and it seems that everything is spinning in one form or another. And of course, we know who the players are. I've rolled this loop back to before sunrise, and this way we could see the progress of just about 12 hours worth. And the last frame on this takes us to just a little bit before, just about 6:30, and it starts right. Let me see where that first frame is. That first frame is at 06. So basically from 2 a.m. last night right through the daytime here today. So you have a good almost 18 hours, well, a good 16 hours of pictures. And a lot of things have changed in those 16 hours that I think are really important with respect to Karen anyway. Definitely a big change there. Hang on, folks, just trying to fix something here, a little technical glitch. So let's examine what we have. And first things first, of course, we have Karen right in here. And we've seen a general expansion of the convection. Yesterday, we had all that northeast shear. When we look at it today, you could hardly find it. Meanwhile, here's Jerry with the circulation center just spinning away, and you've got an arc of thunderstorms that's getting blown out to the northeast. You've got this upper trough that goes down in toward Cuba, and that is also having its impact. Again, it really is looking less and less like a tropical system and more like an upper low. And then you have Lorenzo, okay? Lorenzo is impressive. I mean, this is still a tropical storm, technically. I think they carried winds of 65 miles an hour on the advisory. But this thing is big. I mean, the circulation from this, you're seeing bands of clouds coming up from the equator, going up and wrapping around. There's such a solid feeder band of deep tropical moisture that's getting involved in all of this and wrapping up around a well-defined core. So I'm really I'm really impressed with this. It does look like a bit of a monster out there. The other thing to note out in the Atlantic is, interestingly enough, up here. That's an upper low that is spinning away, and you'll notice that the clouds that are to the west of Lorenzo are pretty much going south to north. Here we've got those northeast winds that were running down into in the Caribbean and just east of the islands yesterday. Well, now those winds are back out through here. So there's a trough here. There is a weakness, especially at the higher levels of the atmosphere. So I don't think there's any mistake here in the idea that Lorenzo is going to respond to this weakness and then just kind of turn into it as we move through the rest of this week and going into this weekend. Lorenzo is going to turn. Interestingly enough, at one point over the weekend, we're going to have Karen, which is now moved northward, and it's actually reformed today further west in a little bit deeper into that convection, and it's moving northward or northeastward. That's going to be coming up out into north of Puerto Rico into the Atlantic. And of course, you're going to have Jerry here in the meanwhile that's going to be drifting to the east and weakening. So all of these players are out there, but at some point at some point, come on. I wish I knew why it does that. Okay, I don't know why it does that. But at some point, we're probably going to have Karen sitting out here somewhere. And we're going to have Lorenzo sitting, I should have made that a K. Sorry. Let's try that again. You get the idea. That's close enough. And then you're going to have Lorenzo somewhere out here as a major hurricane. It's going to be like two tops spinning, a big top and a smaller top. There will be a natural tendency for a low here in this position until the upper high builds off the southeast coast to want to drift to the east. The problem is Lorenzo's going to be in the way. A big cyclone spinning. You're going to see it on the European in particular, almost as if Karen is going to try to drift eastward and then just get bounced back westward because of the presence of Lorenzo to the east. And eventually, as Jerry pulls out and weakens, you're going to have an upper high that's going to build across the Gulf states and off the southeast coast. So that's going to take us through the weekend and into next week. And the key to Karen will be getting underneath that upper high and moving, which eventually I think will turn it either westward or maybe even west-southwestward over time. The other thing I would bring up here is the fact that the big mystery in all this, I think, is going to be what state Karen will be in once it gets north of Puerto Rico. It would seem that it may have some good outflow to take advantage of with that trough to the west of it. So as long as it doesn't move toward that upper trough and get involved in shearing, but just kind of stays to the east of it, that it may have a good outflow set up and favorable conditions for strengthening. Now the one downside is that there's also a lot of dry air that is getting entrained southward. Jerry's been impacted by that, and eventually you might see some dry air. Dry air may become an issue with Karen, but we saw that before in this season with Dorian, when initially dry air was an issue until it wasn't, and it got into a moist environment. But these are factors that we are going to have to pay attention to with respect to the longer term with these systems. Now I'm trying to get this. This computer sometimes gets hung up with stuff, so I'm going to be doing a little bit of switching tonight. I didn't want to load too many things on at the same time. So we'll start with Karen, and we have tropical storm warnings are up for Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. They were carrying, I just want to double check something. I saw some 50 knot plus winds on the recon, and on the advisory, they left it at 45 miles an hour. All right, I just wanted to make sure because I did see flight level winds that were in the mid 50s, so they left it at 45, which is fine. And of course, Lorenzo at 12.8 and 31 even at 65 mile an hour top winds, and Jerry is at 31.1 and 69.0 with top winds of 50 miles an hour, and we have tropical storm warnings up for Bermuda. So let me give you the forecast tracks of this, and then we'll go to the satellite. So as far as Karen is concerned, here's the Hurricane Center's thinking. Keeping it as a tropical storm, actually strengthening it somewhat as it moves northward, then kind of moves, the Friday position is the ones furthest to the east, and then it starts backing west and west-southwest from there. 2 p.m. Friday, 2 p.m. Saturday, and then I think they kind of left out 2 p.m. Sunday, which is that S that's the furthest to the left. Okay, so that's a drift north or north-northeast, and then a sudden shift back to the west or west-southwest going into Sunday. As far as Jerry is concerned, and we have tropical storm warnings up for Bermuda. Remember, they just had Category 3 Umberto a week ago. I think they'll be able to manage this. So you've got the center of circulation that's going to pass close to Bermuda. I wonder how much weather they're going to actually get from that in terms of rain. They may be getting more rain today from the stuff that's to the northeast of the center than they'll get tomorrow when the actual circulation passes. So this is going to be manageable for them. 31, 1, 69, 0, and the top winds at 50. And you can see that they turned Jerry east-northeast to east, weaken it to a depression, and then eventually to a remnant low. And Lorenzo is, of course, on schedule to become a hurricane either tonight or first thing tomorrow morning, and then becoming a major hurricane late this week. My guess is it might get there a little faster than what they're forecasting at all. Usually that's what happens. And that gradual turn northwest, then north-northwest, and eventually north. It never really even gets to 50 degrees west. It gets to about 45, 46 degrees west, and it's already shooting northward. So, again, a major hurricane. You're going to go higher up in the atmosphere to find the steering, and you've got a deep trough there in the upper atmosphere that's got that opening in the Atlantic, splitting two ridges, the ridge that's west of Bermuda, and then the ridge that is out near the Azores and out toward the Canary Islands. So that's the Hurricane Center's view of things. Let's come back to the satellite of Karen. And again, big change from yesterday. If you recall, we had all that shear going on. You could plainly see the clouds east of the islands, of the Leeward and Windward Islands, were moving rapidly northeast to southwest. And today, not so much. You're getting a little bit of it, but really not nearly as much as yesterday. Those upper air winds have relaxed, and that, of course, has allowed convection to kind of burst up on the north side. If you look on the visible, it's a little hard to see, but you can just kind of pick out a little turning there on the north, toward the northwest side of that blob of convection. Somewhere in there is where a center reformed today. Deeper into the heart of that convection, and I think that's why we are seeing the increase in winds. There was hardly any winds to speak of north of the center all night and this morning, and then suddenly we started seeing belts of 35 to 40 and 40 to 45 knot winds being reported by the Air Force reconnaissance aircraft. And you also could see the bottom of the trough that's down to Cuba, the bottom of that trough, and the clouds in Cuba going southwest to northeast. So Karen is going to, if it moves north or northeast and just kind of stays to the east of that trough, it'll be able to benefit from a good outflow setup as opposed to moving toward that and experiencing shear and getting ripped apart in the short term. Now, Jerry, on the other hand, as we take a look at Jerry. Oh, Jerry. Okay, so let's go to Jerry. And again, with Jerry, what we're seeing here is something that really is looking less and less like a tropical cyclone. You have the center of circulation as soon as this darn thing stops, the circle of death there. And you can see these clouds. You definitely can see the circulation. It's just like this giant coil. And then you see these clouds here, right there. You see how they're getting all blown off. So there's some northeasterly shear that's occurring over Jerry. Then you got all of this that's kind of blowing away to the northeast. So right around that center, there just really isn't that much. There's a little convection in there and some heavier downpours, but in terms of big top thunderstorms, not happening. And as all of this just continues to being impacted by that, the trough, the dry air that's getting entrained, this is just going to, I think, move northward and then turn eastward, pass close to Bermuda, and then eventually just get out of the way. And then you're going to be left with Karen, and you're going to be left with Lorenzo, which we're going to go to right now. And we'll take a look at this very, very big storm. I'm just really impressed by Lorenzo. It's just the sheer geography that it covers. I mean, it's just such a wrapped up system. And when you look at it, everything is working correctly. You can see some of the highest clouds turning anticyclonically, or in other words, an upper high over it. It's got you get good inflow of tropical moisture, a good outflow set up. There's hardly any shear here going on at all. and a solid core there. Look at that core just blow up in the last few frames. So this thing is going to probably become a hurricane tonight, or if not tonight, certainly first thing tomorrow morning. We're going to watch this because of the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, it's really about the impact that this is going to have on Karen in terms of the track that Karen is going to ultimately take. So I'm going to jump to the European. Those of you on my Patreon platform, Weather in 10 was all about this today. So you already have seen some of this. So you're ahead of the game. But the players here, as they're on the map, let me just point them out to you. So here you've got Lorenzo. Hang on. Let's try this again. Okay, so there's Lorenzo. That's Karen. And this is Jerry. Okay? And the way the European treats this, this is the map for Thursday morning, so I've jumped ahead a day. Now, there's a natural tendency for storms to want to go to the northeast most of the time, especially with all the traffic that's around off the east coast in one form or another. And Karen is kind of pulling to the northeast. You got Jerry continuing to weaken here as it moves away. In fact, before we get there, let's just back up. Let me start this again, just the way I'll leave this on here. So there you've got Lorenzo, Karen, which at this point is north of Puerto Rico, and here's Jerry. There's another surface low to the north of Jerry, and that's part of the upper trough that's moving off the east coast. Now, moving to Wednesday through Friday and through Saturday. Okay, so now we're at Saturday. Jerry is pretty much gone here. There's an open isobar, so Jerry's completely out of the picture. You are left now with Lorenzo, which is, I screwed that up. Ignore that squiggly line. So Jerry has moved from where it was to the new point, and now you've got Karen that has moved a little bit northeast, and then you've got the distance here between them, which is roughly about 900 miles or so. And this is where you start to get the effects of two rotating tops. If you get two tops and you spin them, and they start to get close together, the centrifugal forces that they give off, well, they will naturally repel each other. And that's what you're going to see here. You're going to see as we move on, and I'll take the markers off, right here at this point, you get a bounce. Okay? Lorenzo is pushing its way northward in response to the trough that is the weakness that is in the Atlantic, and it's moving up in that direction. And now that we have this upper high that's beginning to build off the Atlantic seaboard and through much of the southern half of the United States, you've got Karen responding by either turning west or possibly even west-southwest. I think that's a possibility. And the European holds on to Karen as it gets towards the Bahamas and off the Florida coast by the time we get to the end of the period. If, assuming that a feature survives, that would seem to be the natural way that this will turn out in terms of track. Because you have everything here, to me, certainly suggests that we're going to see this upper high take over. And here you have it in terms of the upper air. I'll roll it back, starting with tomorrow. Let's go to Wednesday. And here's Wednesday. So you've got your upper ridge. Here's Lorenzo. Okay. Somewhere in here is Karen. So you got this upper ridge. You know, the heights are kind of weird how they draw it. But here's your upper high. And, of course, you've got weakening Jerry. You got this short wave that's off the New England coast. But this upper high, at least, is taking Lorenzo out to the west. And the weakness from south of Jerry is getting Karen to move out toward the north. All right, makes total sense. Okay, so now let's go to Thursday and to Friday and to Saturday. So now, as we get to Saturday, what's happening here? So here's Lorenzo. All right, you've got these westerly winds across the Atlantic, just about around 40 degrees north. You have this weakness, upper high, sitting off of the Canary Islands. Upper high building over Bermuda. This is probably, or something in here will represent Karen, and now it's starting to get underneath that upper high. It's not in this weakness area because Lorenzo is going to get there first. Karen can only drift so far east. It's going to hit the forces, basically the forces of Lorenzo. The circulation of Lorenzo is going to start to deflect Karen to the west. And now when we get into Sunday, here we got a big upper high that's building in the Gulf states, the upper high that's south of Bermuda. Karen is somewhere in here at this point and kind of drifting westward, and Lorenzo is moving northward as it responds to these strong westerlies that are in the Atlantic, and again, that weakness there in the ridge. If it weren't for the weakness in the ridge, it would probably just keep going. If there was a stronger ridge across the Atlantic, if there was no deep trough in the high levels, and here's the problem. If this were a weak system, I think it's quite possible that you could see it, make a case that the low-level flow would carry it further to the west. But if we're talking about a major hurricane in this position by Sunday, you start to look at the higher layers of the atmosphere, and you're going to see that the wind is going to be more light southerly, pushing it up, because it's recognizing that at that high level of the atmosphere, 20,000 feet and higher, that there's troughing there. And the storms that are intense, major hurricanes, you got to go higher up into the atmosphere to look for the direction of movement and of steering. It won't respond. I've seen it many times where you look at it, and even at least at 18,000 feet, you can look at it and say this thing should be moving west or west-northwest, and then because of what's going on further up in the atmosphere and how vertical the storm is, you get motion that's more north-northwest or north, or I've even seen northeast. Even though you look at it and say, this thing should be moving more like west-northwest or northwest, it's moving north and northeast. How is this happening? Because you got to look way up in the atmosphere to find the motion. So we're into Sunday, and now we're into Monday, of course, and we've got Lorenzo out there in the Atlantic, starting to make its turn, getting pulled up toward the Azores. And, of course, by the time we get to Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, do we have Karen just east of the Bahamas? And we're going to have this strong upper high sitting over Tennessee and Kentucky, and you've got Karen is basically responding to that upper high, and the flow is pretty much still west to east off the southeast coast of the United States. So it's going to be all about the ridge going forward with respect to Karen, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens when it gets to the other side of Puerto Rico. If it winds up continuing to strengthen. There were two reconnaissance aircrafts going out this evening. One was going to Jerry, and the other one was going to Karen. So the one going into Jerry is just getting there. And as it's flying in on the north side, I'm sorry, this is Karen. I take it back. Let me just make sure. He's got Jerry here, but the map, am I reading this right? Yeah, the map latitude longitude is Karen. So he's got the Levi. If you're watching, you may have your pictures flipped here. So this one is flying into Karen and 19 north. So we're at 18 north and about 65 west. So it's going in to make its first pass in the center. It's flying over the Virgin Islands. And we're in that brighter green, so it's experiencing east winds there of 40 to 45 knots over and just north of the Virgin Islands. So we'll come back to this maybe a little later before we end the live stream to see if we got some later information. And okay, so now he's got mission 6 into Karen, so I'm guessing that this is the Jerry map. No, this is also the Karen map. I'm confused here. All right, so on this map, You know what? I'm a little confused here, folks. 17, 17 and a half, 18, 18 and a half. And then he's got this one labeled on the first one as Jerry, but then the map latitude, longitude labels are 24, 23, 21, unless he's got these numbers labeled wrong. So if this is Jerry, then they got 45 knot winds. You know what? Let him straighten the maps out so I know exactly what I'm looking at. If we look at this one, see now this one here, if these numbers are right, and you look at these winds that it's finding, you're seeing, I mean, I'm seeing some 50 and 55 knot wind barbs here. South of 18 north, between 17 and a half and 18 north at 65 west. So I'm not so sure. I think we're going to have to wait to see if he straightens these pictures out, because I'm not exactly 100% sure what I'm looking at. Sorry for the confusion here, folks, but clearly, I mean, there's a problem here with the latitude and longitude on at least on one of these shots. So, all right, so let's move on. Let's go back to the models and take a look at the overall pattern across North America and see where we're going in the longer term. And we're starting here at the current view, which is, you know, shortwave off the East Coast, trough coming into the plains. You've got a cutoff low out in the Pacific here with an upper ridge off the coast of California. So you got some strong westerlies coming into the Pacific Northwest, and you've got this flow from Alaska down into Canada. Upper low southeast of the southern point of Greenland. A little bit of ridging there in eastern Canada. So you certainly have some traffic going on here in one form or another across the United States. And as we take a look at the situation going forward on the GFS, the first short wave kicks out. The next trough for Thursday brings a weak cold front, and then you start to get that building ridge off the East Coast that eventually spreads into the Southeast and Gulf states early next week until we get to about Thursday. So the weather's going to be relatively non-eventful until Thursday, when you have the models telegraphing a pretty strong trough here swinging out of central Hudson Bay down into the northern plains, and then that trough is going to swing into the eastern states by the time we get to Thursday and Friday. So that's a fairly strong cold front with a pretty decent shot of cool air, assuming that the model, this is day 9, so we could be a little skeptical, but it's done it a few runs in a row, so perhaps a little bit more confidence here. And we're seeing a strong flow coming out of Canada of cool air going into the northeast and into the mid-Atlantic states. Got a couple of short waves coming into the west coast, a little bit of a ridge there from Texas. Not a very impressive one. Stronger upper high that's up in northwestern Canada and extends up into the Arctic. Now that trough's going to lift out, and you have more troughing coming into the east. Basically a westerly flow. There's also a trough that drops down into the western part of the United States in the longer term. Still have ridging here that kind of wants to hang on in the Gulf states, or down in the Gulf of Mexico at least, with the sort of broad west or west-southwest flow. How real that is, I don't know. But I mean, it seems like we're going to have at least a few opportunities for decent shots of cool air going into the first half of the month of October. Whether it winds up being temporary or lasting longer remains to be seen. But I just want to show you the European, by the way. This is the 210-hour new GFS, so we can compare it to the 216 of the European. So let's do the European, and I think you already see the big difference with the European and the GFS. Because the European does not have the same kind of trough that the GFS does. The European holds on to this ridge. So I'm going to just outline the jet on the European, and then I'll flip back to the GFS so you can kind of see where the differences are. And here's your trough on the European. So now I'll change to to the GFS. And let me put the colors back on. So there's your difference. You have a much deeper trough on the GFS in the northern stream that's further along. You also have a much stronger ridge on the European for the same time frame. So you see the model differences here are important. The European still manages to bring a strong cold front through here. It just doesn't seem to have quite the same punch that the GFS has with respect to it. And going forward on the GFS, if we go to the 234, we'll match this up. Let's match it up with the 240-hour European. By the way, strong jet across the Atlantic. You do have actually a little bit of blocking here over Greenland on the GFS with lows along and just north of 50 degrees north going out into the Atlantic Ocean. What that means in the longer haul, I don't know. Cutoff low in the Gulf of Alaska, trough off the west coast. But you see the flow here on the GFS. And now let's switch to the European for the same time period, and we'll bring the map back up, the colors, and there you see the difference. The European has a much flatter west to east flow. The GFS has a much deeper trough, but the European also has a shortwave trough coming into the lakes on day 10 that'll swing through another cold front. Bit of a split flow on the European that sets up, which I think is kind of interesting. You've got the Pacific flow coming in and moving across, but you also have a bit of a Canadian connection here in the longer haul. This is a frustrating time of year, if only because of the fact that if your mind is starting to think in terms of winter, we're not quite there yet. But this is a very good way of exercising your brain to know what to start looking for as we get into the winter months. We certainly are seeing the upper air beginning to change and taking on more of an autumnal look to it with regards to the overall pattern. So at least we know what we have to look for in terms of the long range next week, that things are going to start changing. In terms of the day-to-day weather, back we go. So let's look at the day-to-day weather. I'll give you the snow map to salivate on if you'd like. So here we go. In the east, it's pretty easy. Weak cold fronts, hardly any rain, high pressure. We have another system coming into the northern plains and western lakes for the end of the week with maybe some showers and storms. There's snow up in southwest Canada that extends down into the northern Rockies, Montana and Idaho. Here comes another front for Saturday that it won't amount to much, and then that moves through, and now you have the next high building in on Sunday, and we're going to have this onshore flow that's going to set up right here. You got these northeast isobars, so this next frontal boundary probably gets down to about North Carolina, southernmost North Carolina, and we're going to wait for this high to do something, and guess what? It's going to drop southward as we move into next week. Here's your snow for all you snow lovers up in northernmost Montana and right along the Canadian border, with rain and some showers and storms back into the western lakes. This is for Monday, so you can see why the WPC was doing what it's doing in terms of where it has its heaviest rainfalls. And there's Karen, by the way, the GFS reflection of Karen. It doesn't really do very much with it. By Tuesday, the high starts dropping southward from Nova Scotia and offshore. We get into this southwest flow. So we're going to be warming up ahead of the next front. Meanwhile, there's colder air, and actually it's not a half bad cold high that's coming down into the northern Rockies here toward the end of next week behind that front. And here's your cold front that moves through the east on Thursday of next week. This is probably a little fast, but maybe say late in the day, Thursday or Thursday night. And there's a fairly decent shot of cool air that is coming down behind it. At the very least, it should be seasonal. and it could wind up even producing some below average temperatures if this holds. If the model's idea of a deep trough in the eastern part of the United States late next week is correct, then we're going to have a pretty decent shot of cool air and some early blanket weather. If not, if it's more like the European, it'll be closer to seasonal. And the GFS, by the way, as we know, and the European sometimes does this too, but the GFS in particular in the long range likes to really overdo these troughs in the east a lot of the time, and then when you get into the shorter range, they are a lot tamer. So we'll see where the trends take us over the next couple of days, but at least we've got some interesting things to look at, and certainly from the standpoint of Karen, I'm going to be very interested and curious to see how that winds up playing out with all those complicated complications that we are dealing with Lorenzo and with Jerry and the ridge and the building strong ridge and everything else, and the smaller systems that are impacting development. Okay, Bobby Livingsworth, the GFS will be wrong about what? Be specific, please. It's kind of hard for me to, by the way, when you're looking at stuff, especially in the long range, it's really sort of best to keep an open mind about things in terms of where they're going to go, unless you are, you believe the euro and it being warmer longer. Well, look, I think that's a legitimate. I certainly think that's a legitimate position to take. The GFS, as I said, loves to do that. It loves to overdo troughs. On the other hand, I will just point out that going into this weekend, the European a few days ago had no backdoor front coming through here this weekend, and the GFS did. So now the European has jumped on board with that idea. So we'll see if that holds on for next week, but we're getting closer, so I think we'll start to see models begin to converge a little bit. Any future Keith James, welcome, by the way. Thanks for being here. Any future library talks planned? Would like to have you at the Paramus Library. Okay, Keith, I can do that if you let the Paramus Library contact me. We can try and set something up, and if we can work something out, I'd love to come out. After November 15th, I will have plenty of time to come out to Jersey. So by all means, let them know and that you're interested in maybe having some kind of a weather program, and that I'm available and that they can get in touch with me. My email address, my Facebook page, I'm very easy to find. So let them, have them send me a message, and we'll see if we could work something out. And any of you that are in the area from northern New Jersey to Long Island, certainly, in New York City, in the lower Hudson Valley, and even into southwestern Connecticut, if you would like to have me come out to your local library to give a talk, let your library get in touch with me, and I'd be more than happy to see if I could put something together. I will have time to do this sort of thing now that I'm not spending 3 hours a day on the road driving. By the way, big hellos to Johnny Quest. I know the chairman, Scott Briller, was on earlier, and all the best to his mom, by the way, who's just day by day getting better and better, and that's always good to hear. So we send our best to you, Scott, and to your mom. I know she says she thinks I'm the handsome guy. Tell her thank you. 60-year-old guys like to hear that they're handsome. All right, just to let you know. Is Florida going to get hit by Karen? Asks William Blanco. Two things we have to see first. Does it survive, which I think it will to some extent, and will it develop, or is it going to wind up just kind of weakening a bit once it gets north of Puerto Rico? If dry air starts to get involved in the circulation down the road. We're not seeing the global models really going ape with this. And by the way, even the hurricane tracking models, most of them keep this pretty much a tropical storm all the way through. And look, if it's only something of tropical storm strength, as long as it's moving along, that is manageable. Do I see this as a threat for the East Coast? Well, weather and low. The way it's set up with that upper ridge and the way those upper air westerlies come down, certainly if it's the European, as far as the mid-Atlantic and Northeast are concerned, I would say no. If it's the Southeast coast down to Florida, then then it gets a little trickier because you got to watch, how long does that upper high hang on, and is it tucked in under the upper high? And again, we don't even know what we're going to have at that point. It's quite, if you believe the GFS, the whole thing disintegrates before it even reaches the Bahamas. If you believe the European, you have a system that's intact, but it's still fairly on the weak side as it gets there. So I think we have to we have to let Karen tell us basically what kind of storm are we going to be dealing with once it gets north of the north of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, and whether it has an opportunity to develop. So there's a lot of mystery here going forward, and we're going to have fun, of course, all of us watching it together. Well, I know it's Rosie O'Donnell. Very nice. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hope you're behaving on here. Ruthless Goat. I guess that you cut Facebook out of my will. Well, for those of you, I ranted yesterday about Facebook for the 5th time in the last year. I've been admonished. This time I've been put in a sort of Facebook jail. I can post pictures and videos. I cannot share links. So unless I'm putting up my own stuff, I can't even put my own website stuff on there for a week. I was able to find, I have an end around, so my stuff is getting on there on my page. It's not getting shared out. One of the issues is I have a number of groups that the wonderful groups that I'm part of that have asked me to share my weather stuff on those pages. So this is stuff that the admins told me is okay to do. Facebook apparently has an issue with this. So I must have shared too quickly. Maybe I set off some sort of alarm bells on their end that my account was being hacked, and as a result, I've been put in this sort of 7-day prison. The problem is I don't know. My stuff was labeled officially. It's because I've been posting, quote, abusive content, but I don't know what abusive actually means. And this is the 5th time where I've had a problem with them of one form or another, where they've blocked posts of mine. They've taken away my ability to put videos on for violating community standards, but then they don't tell me what you violated. And then I'm reading through some of the community standard specifics about pornography and selling drugs and all the rest of it, and I just keep thinking, I do weather, okay? These are weather forecast posts. These are weather videos. They are not anything else. But try telling that to a bot or a 20 or 25-year-old millennial whose job at Facebook is to sit there and just ban accounts all day long. I don't know. Honestly, I'm okay with it. All right? Right now, I am totally okay with it. I've been gradually moving my audience away from the Facebook platform and putting them on my free weather app, and I am succeeding in that. So the less I'll have to do on Facebook, the better, and that's good for me. So this is just another wake-up call to just keep doing what I'm doing and growing my YouTube channel, which is front and center my priority. David Schwartz, probably correct. Someone probably reported me, and the bot auto-banned me. I appealed it. I've gotten no response. In the past, when I have had this happen, and I've talked about it on here, on my YouTube channel, I have mysteriously gotten my stuff back in a day or two. So I'll be curious to see if tomorrow or Thursday, where suddenly my banishment until Monday has been cut short. But all I've told Facebook is that as it continues to treat people like me this way, That means that I spend less money on Facebook in advertising. That means I will spend less time on Facebook. That means that I will take my audience off the Facebook platform and move them onto another platform that is far more friendlier, and I don't have this problem. It's plain and simple. So you want to do this to people that are actually, bringing business to you. You have to be accommodative to my audience and to me. If you're not going to be that, then we will just go elsewhere, and there are alternatives. So, Johnny, I really don't. It's not that I need another platform. I have the outlets, and the different platforms are there. This is one, Twitter. I don't spend a lot of time on Twitter, but you know what? I might spend more time on Twitter than I do on Facebook if I'm going to have to risk every time I write something that I'm going to wind up being banned for something, totally innocent. Trigger words, Ruthless Goat, you're correct. Here's another trigger word that I found. I found out was a trigger word, and that's the trigger word threat. I put up a post back about a month or so ago. We had severe weather coming into the Northeast, and my headline was severe weather threat. I had my post pulled. They didn't tell me why. I figured it out. I changed the word threat to risk, and it was perfectly fine. So the problem is that if you're a business, you can't be doing this to businesses where you're just sort of routinely, you're just, haphazardly and arbitrarily going into and making these decisions, and then you don't tell the person. That's the worst part of it. If they would send you a message saying, "Hey, we're pulling your post because you used the word threat," and then you come back and say, "Yes, but look at the context. I'm talking about a severe weather threat." Then you can say, "Okay, that's fine." All right, but they don't do that. They arbitrarily pull people out because of all the problems that they have. They just basically, to use a cliche, shoot first, ask questions later, which I'm sure is going to get me pulled from something. God, hopefully not here. It's a cliche. If you're listening, it's hyperbole. I'm just kind of, it's an analogy. All right. But they don't do that. They knock you off. They tell you that you've committed, the crime against humanity, and you just spend your time wondering. You may go weeks wondering what did you do wrong. That's what happened with me back when I first lost all my publishing tools on Facebook. The day that they blew out all these right-wing accounts, the same day I lost all my publishing tools and all monetization abilities. I spent 3 weeks trying to find out from them, what are you talking about? I violated community standards. What are you talking about? I do weather posts. And then one by one, I started getting stuff back as I just basically said, "Hey, I'm not dealing with you people anymore." And I never did find out. It took until December I finally got the last tool back that I was using. And by that time, I had already just kind of changed everything around that I was doing, that I really didn't need their tool anymore. So I don't care. You know what, guys? As long as I'm safe here on this channel, and hopefully I'm not setting off any kind of issues here on YouTube, we're fine. I get a bigger audience here that watches my YouTube videos than ever watched on my Facebook videos, and I'm really, really happy about that. KNA, they do not have customer service. Okay, they do have some support for business, Facebook business, but even there, it's like pulling teeth sometimes to get somebody. You have somebody that just basically cuts and pastes answers out of a book, and you can't address specific problems by a simple cut and paste method. And you do apparently need a list of approved Facebook vocabulary, KNA. I agree. That does seem to be the way to go. All right, so let's leave it at that. Okay, Ruthless Goat, I've almost got banned for life for quoting the line in the movie Roadhouse. Oh, I know. Really, it's really, they create this platform. it became like the Wild West. Now they're trying to rein everybody in, and everyone's just kind of just revolting and throwing their hands up in the air because they don't want to be bothered with it. All right, let's check the, before I say goodnight, quick self-promotion, shameless as that might be, and then we'll check the 8 o'clock advisories on Jerry and on Karen. I get such a kick out of that call the manager thing. All right, but for those of you who are really weather geeky, you can get on my weather platform on Patreon. We do a lot of extra weather stuff there during the day. Patreon members got a 10-minute video just for themselves on what's going on in the tropics. So that's one of the extras. You can message me anytime. It's just $2 a month, and it goes a long way to support what I'm doing here on YouTube and Facebook and my websites and everything else. It gets me a couple of cigars and pays a bill or two every month. I'm pretty happy. So again, it's just $2 a month, and if weather is something that is really important to you with making day-to-day decisions, I do have some higher tiers available, for snow removal guys, landscapers, outdoor people that work outside and need to know, pool people, as an example, and need to know what the weather is going to be like. Also, if you don't want to join, there's one easy way. If you shop on Amazon, you can use my Joe Stradamus link that I just put up on the chat board to Amazon, and that's an easy way because it doesn't cost you a dime. All you do is use the search bar to find your stuff and buy whatever it is you're going to buy, because you're going to buy it anyway. If you do it through the link, Amazon throws me back a little bit of coin, and I get a little bit of cigar money that way. All of this, by the way, also supports my free weather app. We're a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated sites. And speaking of my free weather app, if you haven't heard and you have it, the iPhone update is out. It came out this weekend. It's been out on the Android version for a few weeks now, but we finally got Apple to wake up and do the update. So there you go. There's a link that'll take you to the links to Google Play and to the App Store. And the app is free. The changes are when you go to the local forecast and the current conditions, it will default to your own location. Now, you don't have to put it manually. And for those of you on Long Island, there's a Long Island tab to get Long Island more specific my perspective anyway, in terms of Long Island information. I'm not up to speed on that and doing something every single day because of time constraints, but eventually in the next month, I will be doing that update, especially when we get into the winter time. There'll be a Long Island update at least once a day. K-Nay, Joe Stradamus is it's J-O, I'll spell it out. It's J-O-E-S-T-R-A-D-A-M-U-S. Okay, so you got all those links up there, and thank you very much. And again, the app is free. If you choose to support it, you can join Patreon, $2 a month, really kind of use everything in conjunction with each other. And remember, if you're on Patreon, you can message me directly, and I do try to respond in a timely fashion. You want a Long Island iced tea, Ruthless Goat? I guess that's a good way to cap off an evening, I suppose. Okay, so weather in 5 tomorrow morning, so we'll update you on everything. And I did say I would, excuse me, I would check for the latest advisory, but weather in 5 tomorrow morning, we'll update Karen, Lorenzo, and Jerry, and we'll also look ahead the next 5 days and give you an idea of what the overnight weather models have done. We have Karen, the broad circulation has moved over Vieques and Culebra Islands, and we're seeing heavy squalls continue over Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. That's the headline from the Hurricane Center. 18.5 north, 65.3 west, moving northeast at 10. Top winds 45 miles an hour, and the lowest pressure is now down to 1,003 millibars. So that's pretty interesting. And the position is 45 miles east of San Juan, Puerto Rico, or about 10 miles north of Culebra. I believe that's how you would say that. If I said it wrong, please someone correct me. And Jerry is now moving north-northeast. Jerry is at 31,368.9, 250 miles west-southwest of Bermuda. Top winds are 50 miles an hour, moving north-northeast at 5, and the lowest pressure is 992 millibars, or 29.30 inches. Just a reminder, if you are watching, again, it's now 8:07, so any of the radars that you might have seen earlier, or the satellites, or the Hurricane Center information, that was the 8 p.m. advisory on September 24th. So if you're watching this on a replay, obviously this is dated, so make sure you go to weather.gov to get your latest weather information regarding any local weather or severe weather, or you can download my app, or go to the Hurricane Center, nhc.noaa.gov, to make sure you have the latest information on any or all of the tropical storms. Have a great night, everybody. I really enjoyed it tonight. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you tomorrow.